think for the last 2 years, I haven't spoken at all. Well, I haven't preached, I haven't spoken. I haven't spoken from the stage at all in the last month, and I think that's the longest that I've gone in the last 2 years. So it's really good to see you guys' face and to be able to talk to you. I will say, I was so excited to hear Caden last week. If you guys haven't heard him, it's on our YouTube channel. You can, if you weren't here, you can do that. But I am also realizing that he has really small ears because I could not get my mic back on today. So if it starts falling off in the middle, sorry about that. But I want today to bring someone out to you. That is one of the most influential speakers of our whole generation, of all of your generations. This person is so important to every single one of your lives. And as soon as I bring that person out, you are going to know exactly who it is. Okay. So look right here. You can put it down if you want to. Look right here. Can you see who? Look around. Who the most influential speaker is? It's you. You are the most influential speaker in your own life. And you may think that's kind of weird, but who talks to you more than you do? Now, some of us might do it out loud. Most of us do it in our heads. But you always have a running conversation with yourself in your head. Who influences you more than you do? You might have some other people in your life that influence you, but you influence you the most. Who decides what you're going to eat, what you're going to watch, what you're going to post online? Now, you may have other people, and you may say, oh, my wife or my kids decide that for me. But you are the only person that decides actually what you put in your mouth, what you actually pay attention to, those things that you post. You are the most influential speaker in your own life. There's always a voice speaking about you. Now, when you have a conversation with someone, it's important to listen to what that person is saying. But really in your life, the most important thing is what you say to yourself about what that person said to you. And we all have those conversations. You had a conversation with someone, and later, usually in the shower sometimes, you replay that conversation in your head. And you try to figure out what they were really meaning, what their body language was saying, maybe what you should have said back instead of what you actually said. So you are still more influential than that person that is talking to you. That inner voice that's going on inside of you is the most important voice and most influential voice that you'll have. So, what are you telling yourself? We're going to look at a story today and think about what you're telling yourself. Okay, thank you, Allie. Put that back. And give a little hand for my little. So we are going to look at the story of David and Goliath. Now, if you've really never been to church before, I know people, as I kind of look around, I see a lot of you are regulars here today, but pretty much everybody knows at least of a little kid who beat or killed a giant. If you grew up in the church, especially as a kid, you may have heard this story over and over again, colored pictures about it, read about it in your little, kid's Bible and things. This is a story sometimes that, because it's so familiar to us, that we don't really look deeply and understand it. Now, I'm going to give you a little side note that is not part of my sermon. That's just me. On Amazon Prime right now, if you have that streaming service, there is a show called The House of David that Mark and I have watched. It is amazing. It is so good, and it is very, it's not completely biblically accurate. They've thrown in, some love story and things like that, but nothing that changes the story and makes it, theologically different or anything. So I don't a lot of times tell you to watch things, but it is amazing. It's only 8 episodes, so as we talk about David and Goliath, go home this week or binge it this weekend, whatever you want to do. Watch that. It's really, really good. Okay, back to our actual biblical sermon here now. So we usually know that story, but what we're going to look at today is we're not necessarily going to look at the actual fight of what happened with David and Goliath. We're going to look at some conversations that David had before he actually got to that fight. So this all takes place in 1 Samuel 17. So we're going to kind of jump around a little bit within this chapter to look at some of these things. So we're going to start 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 41. And it reads, "Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David." So I want to set this scene for you. So we have the Israelites. So the Israelites are the people of God. We've talked about, them leaving Egypt. They have had all kinds of judges. We're going to talk more about a special judge next week. But they've had all these judges. They follow God. They turn away from God. They follow God. They turn away from God, kind of like us. And they do all of that. So they have a king at this time. It's their very first king. They begged God for a king because they wanted to be like all the other nations around them. And that king is Saul. So Saul is over the Israelites. And then we have the Philistines, which are on the other side. And the Philistines are just one of the nations that are around them that they were actually, when they took over the land that God gave them, they were supposed to get rid of all the people that were there, and they didn't. And so this is some of those people that are still kind of around there. So you have the Israelites on one mountain. You have, and I should have known the names of the mountains, I'm sorry. But you have the Israelites on one mountain. You have the Philistines on the other mountain. And down in the valley is this fight. And at this period of time, what would happen is that when two different nations would fight, not just the Israelites, but when any nations would fight, they actually saw it as their gods fighting to see what God would win. They would think that it wasn't just the strongest nation that came out or the best fighters, it was the God that was the best. And so when we look at this, we're looking at Yahweh, our God, that they called Yahweh at that time, fighting against the Philistine God, which was Dagon at that time. So that's kind of how they saw it. So they had this guy, Goliath, that was a giant. And that giant would come out every morning and every night, and he would taunt the Israelites. He would say, you should come out here, send somebody out to fight. Come on out, you guys are, just just talking all the stuff. And, just making fun of them, making fun of their God, telling them that they weren't strong. He would come out every single day and night and do that. Well, he was a giant. So the Israelites were scared of him. Nobody would come out. And honestly, at that time, it was King Saul's kind of job to come out and fight. But he was also scared because he didn't want to fight this giant. So we're going to look at what happens when David, this little shepherd boy, comes on the scene. So like I said, we're going to skip around a little bit. So we're going to look at first when David and Goliath were kind of taunting each other. So we're going to keep going. We're still in 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we're going to look now at verses 42 through 47. So he looked David over. So this is Goliath as he. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy. glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you have come at me with sticks?" Because they didn't send Saul their king or someone big and strong. They just sent this little kid, David. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals. And those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." And I kind of feel like I should just stop and say that's the end, because I think anything that you are battling in your life, if you could just use that and have that confidence of David and just use his speech, our lives would be amazing. But we are going to keep going and look at some of these conversations. So the actual fight of David and Goliath is just a few lines in the Bible. It's not that big. But leading up to that and looking at how David had that confidence, because wouldn't you love to be able to have that confidence on any of your problems, anything that happened, that you could just, say, I know there's some kids in here, sorry, but I like the word carcasses. Like, you're just going to tell them, like, I'm going to give you to the birds, and I'm going to, do all this stuff, because that's such confidence that you know that God is going to take care of whatever issue that you have in your life. So we're going to look at 5 conversations that David had leading up to this, so he was able to give himself some good self-talk and that confidence coming into this. The first conversation is with David's dad, Jesse. And in this conversation, we can see that David had a heart of humility. In 1 Samuel 7:17, it reads, "Now Jesse said to his son David, 'Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp.'" So David is the youngest of these brothers. And at that time, and sometimes it's kind of depending on your family, if you're a military family, it's still kind of like this today, that he just was ready to go and battle. He just couldn't wait. All his brothers were gone. It was kind of like an honor for him to go and battle. But Jesse kept him home and was still tending his sheep. He was a shepherd for his dad, still doing all of that. So Jesse called him in, and David was like, "This is it. I'm going to get to go out. I'm going to battle. I'm going to do this." And he was like, "I just want you to be a DoorDasher today and just take food to your brothers." So imagine if you had something, if you feel like at your job that you're going to get a promotion, or you see something and you're just thinking that somebody's going to just give you some amazing news, and they just want you, to go get their coffee or go do something like that. That's kind of how this feeling that David had. He thought he was going to actually finally be able to be in the mix, and he was just a DoorDasher, just a messenger. But if David had rejected this request from his father, if he had said, "No, I'm more important than that. I don't want to, I want to go to battle." If he would have rejected that, then he wouldn't have been in the position to fight Goliath when he needed to be there. It seems really small for him to be obedient to his father, but it opened a big request from God later. And I found this, I love this quote, and it says, "Big doors have tiny doorknobs." I'm going to say that one more time because I want you to think about it. Big doors have tiny doorknobs. So there might be something in your life that God wants for you. That's just, this amazing thing that he is going to ask you to do, just to step out and have faith and do. But he wants to see how you are with the little things. So he's just going to give you a little doorknob to be able to open that giant door of faith. Now, back in 1 Samuel 16, we have Samuel, who is the prophet. And he is just, in all different movies and things, I always love Samuel because he's like this, almost like a spooky guy with all I can think of is Dumbledore from Harry Potter, but he's got, like the long beard, and he's just, everybody respects him. He tells people what God is telling them, not necessarily what they want to hear, but what God is telling them. And so he, goes around and he gives sacrifices with people and all of those things. So he was the one earlier that anointed Saul as king. Well, Saul has gone away from God. He's kind of just done his own thing. He thinks he's super powerful. He doesn't rely on God anymore. So God has told Samuel to anoint another king. So in Samuel 16, just the chapter right before this, Samuel has come to Jesse's household because that is where God has said the next king is going to come from. And so Jesse has all of his sons come in. Remember, this is before they're gone to the battle. This is the chapter before. So he has all of his sons come in, and, Samuel's no. And then he has all of his sons there, and none of them, God is telling him, is the next king. And Jesse's like, well, I have David. He's like a shepherd out in the field, but he's just a teenager. And so he comes in, and Samuel can hear from God and say, this is the one. So he anoints David as the next king. So think about how David could feel. He wants to go to battle. He wants to do all of this stuff. His dad asks him, he thinks he's going to, be able to do this. Just ask him to take food. If it was me, I might say, were you just here like a few weeks ago when I got anointed king and I'm going to be the new king and you're just asking me to take food? Like, I am a lot more important than just your food runner. And maybe that's just me. We're a little smaller today, so you can talk back to me today. Would you guys feel like that? I hopefully it's not just me. I would feel like that. I would think I'm really important, and you're not using what God has given me. But David is just like Chick-fil-A, and he just says, my pleasure. Whatever my Father requests, I will do it. And so he stewards those small things well because he has a heart of humility. And that heart of humility put him in a place for God to use him later. So we think about that. If God is asking you to do something small in your life, do you have a heart of humility to respond with my pleasure? Whatever my Father asks, I will do. Or do you come up with excuses or think that it's beneath you, that it's not something that you need to do? Because if you steward the small things well, that's when God will place you in the places to have those big faith moments that are really important. So the second conversation David has is once he's there, he has a conversation with the soldiers. And in this, we can see that he has a vision of victory. So when David came, he heard these same words that Goliath was saying. Remember, he's been saying all this stuff for the last 40 days and taunting them, yelling at them, talking bad about God. David could hear those same words, but his reaction was completely different than all the rest of the Israelites that were there. David had been spending his days tending sheep, writing songs and poetry about God, singing to God, worshiping God, being in that space, that kind of alone space with God. So his heart was full of God when he got there. When you've been talking to God and you are close to God and you know who he is in your life, you walk into rooms differently than other people. And that's what David did. David walked into this situation differently because he knew God. He didn't just know God in his head, who he was. He knew him in his spirit. His ear was turned to the frequency of faith. And I love the way it says in the Bible too, he was like, who has the audacity to say that about Yahweh, about our God? Everybody else was just kind of hiding in their tents and trying not to, to move too much or let Goliath see them. But David, just this kid, is like, what? Why are you people not trying to do something about this? This is crazy. And he immediately has a vision of victory because he knows that God is greater than anything else in the world. And so he walks in there knowing it doesn't matter who we're up against. It doesn't matter how strong we are physically or if we have swords and spears or anything. We know that our God is more powerful than anything else. And so he is going to give us a victory over everything else. So whatever you focus on in your life is what is going to grow in your life. So if you're focusing on fear that you have about a situation, or you're focusing on anxiety you have in a situation, or you're focusing on the problem and trying to figure out how to solve that problem, that is what's going to grow in your life. But if you focus on your relationship with God and knowing who he is deep in your spirit and knowing that he can give victory over everything, then that is what's going to grow in your life. Do you see yourself winning? If you're struggling in your marriage, or you're struggling in your job, or you're struggling in your finances, when you're close to God, do you see yourself winning with God? And that doesn't mean winning doesn't mean you have everything that you've ever wanted and, it's rainbows and unicorns or anything like that. It's that God gives you victory over those storms, and he's with you in them. The third conversation that David had was with his brother, Eliab. And this shows us that David knew the real enemy. So Eliab was the oldest brother. So remember last chapter when I told you that Samuel came to anoint the next king. So Eliab was the first one to come out. And when you kind of thought he was the oldest brother, he was tall, I just imagine him dark and handsome, the long curly hair, all the stuff. He was who you would think would be the next king because he was the oldest brother. He looked like a king, but he was overlooked because he was not the one that was chosen. And I love how when Samuel is talking, it tells us in 1 Samuel 16, Samuel is telling them that God looks at the heart. Man looks at our outward appearance, but God looks at your heart. So that's how God knew that David was the king and Eliab wasn't going to be. But imagine now if you're Eliab. You're the oldest brother. You've held things together. You've been there for 40 days, just trying to fight, but not really because you're scared and all of this stuff. And your kid brother a few weeks ago got anointed by Samuel. And now he's running up, supposed to be bringing you some bread, and he's telling you about, like, why are you scared of the giant? Like, you kind of just want to give him a little kick in the shins. I mean, that's what it would feel like, because he's just this annoying little kid, and what is he thinking about? And so Eliab tells him that he kind of belittles him, and he tells him he's prideful and he shouldn't be talking like that. And I love how David responds. David just looks at him and says, "What have I done now?" And then turns his back on him and keeps going on his mission to find out more about what's going on with Goliath. And sometimes that's what we need to do. Sometimes we get caught up with the wrong enemy. David knew that the enemy at that time was Goliath, because Goliath was against their God. And so that was his focus. When Eliab started kind of talking to him and trying to get his attention away, he knew that that wasn't the enemy. That his brother, even though he probably could have stayed and gotten in a fight with him and done all the things with him, he knew that wasn't the enemy. So he turned his back on him and kept going. And sometimes that's what we have to do too. Even your Christian brothers and sisters, because Eliab had followed the law of Yahweh. He knew God in his head. He knew these things, but he was still not at the place where David was. He was still trying to bring David down. So sometimes we get caught up with fighting with our own brothers and sisters in Christ and getting our focus off of the enemy, who is Satan, who is trying to kill, steal, and destroy us and all of our friends and our family. And we get caught up in that. And so we want to be like David, and we just want to turn our back and say, no, I'm not going to get caught up in that fighting. I'm going to turn and I'm going to face the real enemy, and I'm going to keep going. The fourth conversation that David had was with King Saul. So he's now kind of in to the camp now, and he's looking for the person who is in charge, who is Saul. So this conversation with King Saul, it shows us how to work your weapon. So David comes, and I love this scene. David comes to King Saul, and you think that, Goliath is like giant. He's like 9 foot something. I looked it up, and now I forgot to write it down, so I can't remember exactly, but he was 9 foot something. And he, and you've got this little kid running up to the king saying, "I'll fight him. I'm ready. I'll go fight him." And Saul just kind of brushes him off at first and is like, "Oh, whose kid is this? Like, why is this kid coming up to me?" But Saul was projecting his own fears onto David. He says, you're too little. You're not strong enough. You can't do this. But that's what Saul was thinking about himself, that he wasn't strong enough, that his army wasn't strong enough, that he couldn't do this. But then David tells him about the ways in which God helped him. God helped him defeat a bear. God helped him defeat a lion whenever he was tending sheep. And he's like, God, help me do all of these things. I know I'm a little kid and I'm not strong, but God is strong. It doesn't matter who we are. It's God who fights the battles for us. And so Saul's like, okay, go ahead. God be with you. And then he gives him his own armor. So we have the armor of, it's the king's armor. So it's this amazing, fitted armor that he can go out there. And if a javelin hits him or anything like that, and he puts them on, and I can just imagine David kind of, trying to put it on. And you imagine if David was younger, it's like too big for him and stuff. And so David just says, I can't do this. I'm not going to wear this armor. First of all, if it's God fighting the battle, I don't need any armor. But mostly, this is your armor. It's made for you. It's not made for me. And that's what we do sometimes. When we have battles that we are trying to fight in our lives, we try to put on someone else's armor. we see how other people have reacted to things. Maybe sometimes you have an armor of humor. You just kind of, try to deflate things just by saying things are funny. Maybe you have an armor of defensiveness. You say, I'm not going to let anything bother me. I'm going to put a wall up, and it's not going to bother me. But we look at all these different armors that we have seen other people use. But David said, I don't need that. I have God, and he has given me all the protection from the enemy that I need, which is just him and his presence. So until you take off that armor of other people that you have tried to wear, you won't be able to grab your own weapons, your weapons of the shoes of peace. You won't be able to grab your weapon of the spirit of the sword, which is the Bible. Those are the weapons that God has given us. So he took those all off, and it tells us in 1 Samuel 17, verse 40, then he took his staff in his hand. His staff is just like his shepherd's staff. Those that have the big hook to kind of get the sheep, so it's not a weapon at all. And he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, and he put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag with his sling in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. So the weapon that he had was the presence of God and just a few stones. He didn't take anything else with him. And this last conversation, I think, is the most important conversation that we need to look at. This is his conversation with Goliath. And in this, we see how he throws a name. So David goes up to Goliath, and I love, this is one of my favorite stories, if you can't tell, in the Bible. Just he goes up to him, and, Goliath is like, really? We read earlier how he's like, you send me sticks and stones? Like, what am I, a dog? And he's just this kid that is coming up to him, and so Goliath is just laughing. He's been mocking their God, mocking the Israelites, but now he's like, this is your best? This is what you're sending me? And the enemy loves to mock us. When we are going up against our enemy, he loves to say, oh, so you're ready to fight now, and this is what you got? This is it? But we have the presence of God with us. David says, you come at me with sword and spear, but I come at you in the name of the Lord God Almighty. And then he throws his rock, and Goliath falls down dead. Now, I want us to think, what did David actually throw at Goliath? Now, it would have made sense if he would have said, you come at me with sword and spear, and I come at you with a slingshot, because that's literally what he had, that he threw. But he doesn't say that. He says, I come at you with the name of the Lord God Almighty. He doesn't throw a rock. He throws the name of the Lord at Goliath. It's not the rock. It's literally the rock that hits him in the head, but it's not the rock that defeats Goliath. It's the name of the Lord that defeats Goliath. Scientists I watched this little video, and they do this whole thing about, there's like all kinds of Newton's second law of motion and distance and all this stuff, how David could have never actually defeated Goliath with the rock. And I believe that's true. They were trying to kind of disprove this whole story in the video that I watched. But I don't believe that the rock is what killed him. I believe that it was the power of the name, not the power of the stone. So if you think about it, if you have something that you're facing, you have this giant in your life, you have a situation, finances, your family, marriage, whatever is going on in your life that you are facing. What God has given us is his name. And that's what we throw at our enemy. Because That is the only thing that is going to defeat everything else. And long before David came to this confrontation, remember those times I said he was sitting, and you can, even in the Psalms, you can read this, because even though in the Bible, Psalms is after this, the book of Psalms, the songs and the poems that he wrote happened during this time. So he was out in that field, getting close to God, knowing God in his spirit, so that when he came to this battle, he didn't even question that God would defeat his enemy. So you might be at a couple different places. You might be right now where you think, I don't have a huge, we all obviously have issues. We have, stuff that's going on in our life, but you might not have some giant problem right now that you're facing, some giant issue that you're facing and praying for. Then this is your time as a shepherd in the hills to just get close to God, to worship him, to know who he is. So when you get to that battle, you don't even question that God will defeat whatever enemy you are facing. Maybe you are at that battle right now. You have something, a giant that you are facing right now. Remember those times that God helped you. Remember when he helped you defeat that bear, when he helped you defeat that lion, the other times when he helped you defeat things, and know that I am going to throw the name of the Lord Almighty at my problem, at whatever is in my life. So we're going to pray together, but first I want us to think about, just take a moment and think about where you are with this. Are you at a place that you are just growing closer to God? And maybe you're at a place right now that this is your first time. This is, you haven't been for a while, you're not, or even you come every Sunday, but this is all you get of God is on Sunday morning. This is not, we love having you here, and, this is not enough. Sunday morning is not enough for you to grow and be able to have the victories we're talking about today. So think about where you are right now. Are you at a place that you are growing daily, that you are getting closer to God? Do you have people to talk to? Are you reading your Bible? I know we have a huge percentage of our church right now that's reading through the Bible in a year together. Are you doing that? Are you taking those times when you're not in active battle to grow closer to him? And if you're not, why not? Because that's the most important thing in your life. That's the only way that you're going to defeat those battles. Maybe you've done that. Maybe you've been growing. Maybe you've taken, a few years and you're part of our Bible studies that we're doing and things, and you have this giant in your life. And you've done everything that you can. You've gone, to doctors. You've gone to, you've tried to figure out, you have all the spreadsheets. You have all of this stuff. And I'm not saying those are bad things at all. Those are things that God also gave us to help us. But that's where you're putting your faith in victory, when your faith needs to be in the almighty name of God. So as I pray, I want you to think about where you're at with that and what your next step needs to be, because everybody's next step might be a little bit different. It might be growing closer. It might be just keeping on the path that you're on. It might be really looking at your problem today. So if you guys could go ahead and bow your heads. God, just thank you so much. Thank you for your name. Thank you that you have given us just the power of the Almighty to fight our battles for us. And help us remember that if we are in the time right now that we are just at peace, most of the things in our life are pretty peaceful. Let us take that time to grow closer to you, to love you, to get to know you in our heart, in our soul, in our mind, and to where when we come to a battle, we just can give it all to you. And I want to pray for those that are in battles right now, that are just daily fighting with everything that's going on in their life. Help them remember that the only thing that is going to knock down their giant is your name. You might have them use a stone or use something to help that, but it's not the tool that they're using. It's the almighty name of God. We love you so much, and we're so happy that you are here with us and that we can call on your name. In your name, amen.